Have you heard anything new on possible candidates or any name that you can mention right now regarding the new AD?
Chris, that thinking that you mentioned, I can see how some people would say, hey, look, well, the old way's not working, and you go drastic and you want something like that. I've talked to several influential people within the university, and there's one faction that wants sort of the non-traditional athletic director, but then there's a large group that feels the way is still to get somebody that has considerable college athletic director experience, because with an outsider, just like Brett Yormark was to the college landscape, yeah, they're going to do things differently, but there's still aspects that you need to be able to handle within the program. And I think eventually it's a sitting experienced athletic director, just because knowing who's doing the hiring and sort of maybe what they will probably lean towards. It's probably maybe the safe bet. But to answer your question, there have been the typical names that have floated. Jeremiah Dickey, I think at some point is still involved in this. I don't know if he's necessarily the front runner anymore, or if there was even a pecking order. I think he's a guy. David Fletcher is still very much in this. He's the Lone Star Sports and associated with the Texans. He's sort of the outside the box thinking if you go that route. He hasn't been a college AD before. David Saylor from Miami, Ohio is a name that I continue to hear. Stephanie Remke, who was formerly at Texas A&M. I believe she's at Nevada right now. That's a name that I continue to hear. And then some other ones. But the interesting thing is they have a search firm in place, but because of travel and Renew Couture was out of the country, and now the hurricane this week, they haven't really done a lot of the informal interviews. They've had third parties reach out to candidates and gauge interest, maybe do some groundwork. But I think this thing starts to take off middle of this week, and my guess would be that there'd be an athletic director in place at the earliest late next week.
Okay. I was hoping by the end of the month, so that's great. And I'll mention this. I was driving around campus yesterday to pick up a colleague to come to the go to the hobby for the airport. And there is a lot of tree damage on campus, lining the sidewalks, the smaller trees, the younger trees that were planted. A lot of those that were blown over. So I'm sure the president Couture is going to have to deal with that as well. That's got to be handled by a certain group of folks, right, in addition to focusing on the new AD as well.
Well, they've got to get this right. And you were on Kelvin Sampson's call a few weeks ago, and he called it probably the biggest hire that she'll make. This is her legacy. I do think that she's probably going to be in office maybe 2 more years through the centennial in 2027. And then I think that's it. So typically you have an AD for 5 years in most cases. So whoever they hire is going to be there after Renew Couture is possibly no longer at the university. So they got to get this right. And then also they got to get it right for the simple fact that from a budgetary and finance reasons, they're a mess. I don't know if that's the polite way to say it, but there needs to be direction. And as Kelvin said, go get Lewis and Clark, because you need somebody to lead you to the new frontier.
Yes.
And that's sort of, so I'm kind of glad that this thing is taking a little bit of slower pace. So at least, if it's not all just scheduling, at least maybe they're sitting down and they're saying, hey, let's look at this really hard, and let's start to look at who we think are the best candidates instead of just rushing and getting any candidate.
Right. Got to get it right.
Get it right. Yeah, exactly.
Before you join the convo, we was having sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, this is just a follow-up to Joseph's comment. And Chris, this question for you too, because I hear this off U of H and their financial troubles. I'm just curious, what kind of led, I'm sure it's multiple decisions, but what kind of led to those financial troubles for U of H?
Well, if you look at the numbers, and they're available out there, Sportico is a good resource. The Knight Commission, all the NCAA reports that they file every year. This goes back, Andy, probably at least 12 years. I mean, there was a point that they had to put their foot down and say, if we want in the next round of a realignment to be an option, we've got to go out and do this. So it started with TDECU Stadium, and there was a big deal with that in terms of how that was financed and what the students put in with the student fees. So that's one component. And then you had to do something with Hofheinz. I mean, that was a non-starter. That really took off when Kelvin got there. The Guy V. Lewis, the indoor practice facility, and then the last piece here with the Memorial Hermann Ops Center. So all this was sort of been a steady list of things that you had to do. And as a result, they have mounted an incredible load of debt that has had to be subsidized through the university. Most schools, or nearly every school, gets some type of support from their university. Granted, if you're Texas or Ohio State, it's not a huge chunk because they're making 198, 200 million in revenue a year. Schools like Houston, even a Memphis, for instance, and a lot of Power Fives don't have that revenue, or teams like Texas Tech and Baylor, who have been in the Big 12 a long time, that do. It's not as much. But in Houston's case, they had to leverage themselves way in advance so that they could at least be an attractive enough option to get in. So at this point, when you're all in, you can't pump the brakes just yet, because Kelvin said you can be in the Big 12, but that doesn't mean you're a Big 12 school. So we're talking probably another 3 or 4 years that they've got to continue to put the resources in, whether they like it or not, because those full shares don't take effect for another 2 years. And even then, you're finally going to be able to maybe pay back some of the, God, I don't know what it is now. I know it's been about $250 million since 2016, maybe, that it's been subsidized. It's been one of they're the most subsidized, or at least top 2 or 3 in the nation. So all that factors in, Andy, to where you kind of had to do it. It's like if you wanted a job and you went out and bought you all the new suits, great shoes, and you're smelling good with a new cologne, you got some watches, you bought all this because you want to look the part and you needed it to get the job. Well, you got the job, but you can't start wearing shorts and sweats to the office.
The moment you get
gotta
it.
keep the appearance up. Now, Dayon knows about fashion, so Dayon will tell you you got to continue to look good. And right now is not the time for Houston to say, hey, I'm going to wear the hoodie and the cargo shorts and flip-flops out and about. They've got to continue to sort of build off of that. And that's the double side of the sword there, because it's tough and they're looking for money, but you're living a certain lifestyle right now, and it's not going to get any cheaper with the way these things are going. Because remember, 20 million, 22 million is going to have to come from somewhere to pay the players as part of that house settlement and the revenue share that's coming up here in the next year or so.
Yeah, UH has put a lot on his credit card, basically.
Exactly.
And they got to pay it off. That's what it comes. That's what
Can't be playing those minimum balances.
Right.
If you do that, you're going to be in debt for the entire time.
Yep.